The Judgment and the Defiance. The Council's verdict: the Central Tribunal of the Galactic Council occupied a space station so large it had its own artificial gravity and weather systems. In the main judgment hall, representatives from 184 different species gathered to witness what they believed would be a simple case. A young species called humanity had violated protocol, or so the charges claimed. The hall itself was a marvel of engineering, with holographic displays floating in the air and translation fields that allowed every species to understand each other instantly. Commander James Mitchell stood in the defendant's circle, a ring of light on the polished floor that marked him as the one being judged. He wore the formal uniform of Earth's Unified Space Command, dark blue with silver insignia. Around him sat or floated or hovered hundreds of alien beings, each more exotic than the last. Some had multiple eyes, others had no eyes at all. Some breathed oxygen like humans. Others existed in contained environments filled with gases that would kill a human in seconds. High Arbiter Quellon, a being that resembled a floating crystal formation that hummed with inner light, spoke in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The charges against humanity are clear. Your species established colonies in the Tertian sector without proper authorization. You exploited resources that belonged to the collective heritage of the Council. You refused to cease operations when ordered. How do you answer these charges? James took a deep breath before responding. His voice was steady, but inside he felt the weight of representing his entire species. High Arbiter, humanity followed every regulation in the Council's colonial expansion guidelines. We surveyed the Tertian sector for 18 months. We found no signs of previous claims. We found no inhabited worlds. We found no protected sites. We filed our colonization request through proper channels and waited the required 90 days for objections. None came. Only after we invested 12 years in the lives of thousands of colonists did anyone raise concerns. A rippling sound came from the section where the Vrelian Empire delegates sat. Ambassador Thexnar, a massive creature covered in thick scales and multiple arms, rose to speak. The Tertian sector falls within our traditional sphere of influence. Our ancestors hunted in those regions 6,000 years ago. Humanity's presence there insults our heritage and threatens our security interests. James felt anger rising but kept his voice calm. Ambassador, with respect, hunting in a region 6 millennia ago does not constitute a legal claim under current Council law. If it did, your empire could claim ownership of half the known galaxy. We are not asking for special treatment. We are asking to be held to the same standards as everyone else. The hall erupted in various sounds. Some species clicked their approval. Others hissed their disapproval. The Vrelians looked furious, their scales darkening with anger. High Arbiter. Quellon's crystal form pulsed with light, calling for silence. The tribunal has reviewed all evidence and consulted with the Council's senior members. While humanity's colonization filing was technically correct, we find that special circumstances apply. The Vrelian Empire's historical and cultural connection to the Tertian sector takes precedence over humanity's recent claims. Therefore, we order the following. All human colonies in the Tertian sector must be abandoned within 45 standard days. All infrastructure must be left intact and transferred to Vrelian control. Earth must pay 800 billion credits in compensation for cultural damages. These terms are final and not subject to appeal. James stood motionless for a moment, processing what he had just heard. 800 billion credits would devastate Earth's economy. Abandoning the colonies meant leaving behind 15 years of work and displacing 200,000 human colonists who had built lives there. Children had been born in those colonies. People had died building them. And now they were being taken away not because humanity had done anything wrong, but because they were not powerful enough to stop it. What if we refuse? James asked quietly. Then the Council will authorize enforcement action, Quellon replied. Military forces will remove your colonists by force if necessary. Resistance will be met with appropriate response. This is for your own good, Commander. Humanity must learn its place in the galactic order. Earth's decision. The journey back to Earth took 8 days through the network of jump gates that connected civilized space. James spent most of that time writing his report and trying to find diplomatic solutions that did not exist. By the time his ship entered Earth's solar system, he had accepted the truth. Diplomacy had failed. The Council did not respect laws or justice. They only respected power. The emergency session of Earth's Unified Command took place in Geneva, in a conference room deep underground. Present were Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen, General Marcus Okoye of the Ground Forces, Director Lisa Yamamoto of Intelligence, and representatives from every major Earth government. James presented his report, and the room fell silent as the implications sank in. Fleet Admiral Chen spoke first. She was a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too many difficult decisions. If we surrender, we establish a precedent. Every species in the Council will know they can take whatever they want from us. We will spend the next century being exploited and pushed around. But if we fight, we face the entire Galactic Council. Their combined fleet has thousands of ships. We have 340. General Okoye leaned forward. He was a tall man with dark skin and the bearing of someone who had spent his life in combat zones. Numbers are not everything. The Council has never fought a war against a unified, desperate species. They are used to civilizations that follow their rules. Humanity does not have that luxury anymore. If we are going to die, we should die standing. Director Yamamoto adjusted her glasses and pulled up holographic displays showing Council military dispositions. The Council's strength is also their weakness. They have 184 member species, each with different military doctrines, different technologies, different languages. Their command structure is a nightmare of committees and approvals. They have never had to fight a guerrilla war. They have never faced an enemy willing to sacrifice everything. The debate lasted 6 hours. Some wanted to negotiate, to buy time, to find allies within the Council. Others wanted immediate military action. A few wanted to surrender and hope for mercy that would never come. Finally, Fleet Admiral Chen called for a vote. When the count was finished, the decision was made. Earth would not surrender its colonies. Earth would not pay tribute for crimes it did not commit. Earth would fight. That night, Admiral Chen activated Protocol Omega, a series of plans that had been developed in secret for exactly this scenario. Military reserves were called up. Civilian factories were converted to military production. Scientists were pulled from universities and put to work on weapons development. And most importantly, special operations teams were deployed to Council space with orders to make the enemy bleed. The first strike commander, Elena Vasquez, led Strike Team 7, a unit of 12 specialists trained in deep space operations. They had spent 3 months traveling through Council space on a civilian freighter, hiding among the regular merchant traffic. Their target was Anchor Point Station, a massive military facility where the Vrelian enforcement fleet was gathering. The station hung in space like a small moon, covered in docking ports where warships attached like parasites feeding on a host. Hundreds of ships were there representing dozens of species. They were preparing for the journey to the Tertian sector to enforce the Council's judgment. They expected to face frightened colonists and a token defense force. They did not expect what was coming. Elena and her team transferred to the station on a supply shuttle, using forged credentials that intelligence had prepared. The Vrelians barely checked their identification. Why would anyone attack here so deep in Council space? The team split into 4 groups once inside. 2 groups headed for the main power distribution center. 1 group went to the station's communication array. Elena and 2 others went to the docking control systems. The plan was simple but required perfect timing. At exactly Aero 300 station time, when the fewest personnel would be on duty, they would strike. Elena watched the chronometer on her wrist tick down the final seconds. 3, 2, 1 mark. The power distribution center exploded first. Not a massive explosion that would destroy the station, but a carefully placed charge that severed the main conduits feeding power to the docking clamps. Across the station, 200 warships suddenly found themselves unable to maintain their docking locks. Emergency systems kicked in, but those had been sabotaged too. Elena's team took over the docking control systems, overriding the safeties and releasing all clamps simultaneously. Without power to their magnetic locks, the massive warships began to drift. In the confined space around the station, ships collided with each other. Hulls scraped against hulls. Docking ports tore free. The communication array went down moments later, preventing any coordinated response. The chaos lasted 47 minutes. By the time Vrelian security forces figured out what had happened, Strike Team 7 was already gone, having escaped on a pre-positioned shuttle. Behind them, they left 23 damaged warships, a crippled station, and a council that was just beginning to understand what kind of enemy they had created. The message. News of the Anchor Point incident spread through Council space like wildfire. Official reports called it an accident, a malfunction of aging systems. But every intelligence service knew the truth. Humanity had struck first, and they had struck hard. More importantly, they had struck deep inside what should have been safe territory. 3 days later, a human transmission appeared on every major communication network in Council space. It was not encrypted. It was meant to be seen by everyone. The image showed Fleet Admiral Chen standing in front of Earth's flag. Her message was brief but clear. To the members of the Galactic Council, humanity did not seek this conflict. We followed your laws. We respected your institutions. We tried to find peace through your justice system. You rejected us. You stole from us. You threatened us. Now you will learn what happens when you back humans into a corner. We did not start this war, but we will finish it. Every species that sends ships against us will bleed. Every facility that supports military action against humanity will burn. Every leader who votes for our destruction will look over their shoulder for the rest of their lives. We are not asking for mercy. We are not begging for negotiations. We are telling you how this ends. You leave us alone, or we make you regret the day you decided humans were weak. The choice is yours. The transmission ended. Across Council space, representatives looked at each other with growing concern. Some species had fought wars before. They recognized the tone in Admiral Chen's voice. It was not anger or desperation. It was certainty. The certainty of people who had already decided they would rather die fighting than live on their knees. High Arbiter Quellen called an emergency session of the tribunal. Ambassador Thexnar of the Vrelian Empire demanded immediate military action. Other species urged caution. The debate raged for hours, but eventually the council made its decision. They would proceed with the enforcement action. They would assemble the largest fleet in recent history. They would go to the Tertian sector and crush human resistance. Then they would go to Earth itself and end this defiance permanently. What the council did not know was that humanity had been preparing for this moment since the day they joined the galactic community. Every military strategist on Earth had studied council warfare. They had identified weaknesses. They had developed tactics. They had built weapons specifically designed to counter council technology. And most importantly, they had accepted that conventional warfare was not how humans would win this fight. As the council fleet began its journey toward the Tertian sector, strike teams 8 through 20 were already moving into position throughout council space. Saboteurs, hackers, assassins, and soldiers, all with the same mission: make the council pay for every inch they tried to take. The war had begun, and humanity was fighting it on their own terms. The Reckoning, the Ghost War. The Council Enforcement Fleet consisted of 312 warships from 23 different species. It was the largest military force assembled in 40 years, meant to overwhelm any resistance through sheer numbers and firepower. High Commander Vrextel of the Vrelian Empire led the fleet from his flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Eternal Dominance. He had fought in 4 previous conflicts and never lost a battle. He expected the Tertian sector operation to be his easiest victory. The fleet traveled through council space in a display of military power meant to intimidate. They passed through 6 different systems, and at each one, local populations watched the armada pass. The message was clear. This is what happens when you defy the council. But something strange began happening as the fleet moved deeper into space toward human territory. Ships started disappearing, not in dramatic battles, but quietly, 1 or 2 at a time. A destroyer that fell behind due to engine problems and never caught up. A cruiser that reported a minor malfunction and dropped out of faster-than-light travel to make repairs, then went silent. A supply ship that simply vanished between one jump and the next. At first, High Commander Vrextel assumed these were accidents or equipment failures. Space travel was dangerous even with advanced technology. But then the bodies started appearing. A Vrelian captain was found dead in his quarters, killed by a poison that had been introduced into his personal food supply. A Kelthian admiral's shuttle exploded during a routine inspection flight, with evidence pointing to sabotage. A Margolian ship's computer system was hacked, causing the life support to fail and killing all 200 crew members before anyone realized what was happening. Humanity was hunting the hunters. Strike teams that had been positioned weeks earlier were now activating, hitting targets that should have been impossible to reach. They did not fight fair battles. They used poison, sabotage, hacking, assassination, and terror. Every species in the enforcement fleet began looking over their shoulders, wondering if the human infiltrators were already aboard their ships. High Commander Vrextal ordered security increased. Every ship conducted searches. Every crew member was screened. Paranoia spread through the fleet faster than any disease. Species that had been allies for centuries began suspecting each other. What if the humans had recruited collaborators? What if some council species were secretly helping humanity? The unity that had seemed so strong began to crack. Strike Team 12, led by Captain Robert Chen, executed one of the most daring operations of the war. They infiltrated a fuel depot at Kepler Station, a facility that supplied the enforcement fleet. Instead of destroying it immediately, they contaminated the fuel supply with a chemical compound that would not show up on standard tests, but would cause engines to fail catastrophically after prolonged use. Over the next 2 weeks, 17 ships suffered critical engine failures. Some were stranded in deep space. Others exploded during jumps. The fleet's advance slowed to a crawl as every ship had to have its fuel tested and replaced. The Battle of Tertian Prime. When the enforcement fleet finally reached the Tertian sector, they found the human colonies abandoned, not destroyed, not defended, simply empty. Every colonist had been evacuated. Every piece of valuable equipment had been removed. What remained were empty buildings and a few defensive satellites that immediately opened fire. The satellites were not particularly dangerous. They were destroyed within minutes by the fleet's superior firepower. But they served their purpose. While the Council ships were focused on the orbital defenses, they did not notice the small human ships approaching from behind a nearby moon. These were not warships. They were converted freighters and mining vessels, armed with improvised weapons and crewed by volunteers, who knew this would likely be their last mission. Commander Lisa Park commanded the human squadron from a modified cargo hauler called the Defiant Hope. She had been a merchant captain before the war. Now she was leading 20 civilian ships against a military armada. The odds were impossible, but Lisa had learned something important during her years in space. In the vast emptiness between planets, sometimes the smallest advantages mattered most. The human ships did not try to fight conventionally. Instead, they released thousands of small objects into space. To the Council sensors, they looked like debris or cargo containers. In reality, they were mines, each one containing enough explosive power to cripple a warship if it detonated close enough. The Council fleet, confident in their shields and armor, did not take evasive action. They pushed forward, eager to claim their prize. The first mine detonated against a Margolian cruiser, blowing a hole in its hull large enough to fly a fighter through. The second and third mines took out a Kelthian destroyer's engines. Then the chain reaction began. As ships maneuvered to avoid the mines, they moved into the paths of other mines. Some ships fired their weapons, detonating mines prematurely and creating explosions that damaged nearby vessels. In 20 minutes, the organized fleet formation dissolved into chaos. Lisa's squadron used the confusion to attack. They targeted command ships and communication vessels, anything that would disrupt the fleet's coordination. The Defiant Hope fired its makeshift railgun at a Vrelian command carrier, the projectile punching through shields that were designed to stop energy weapons, but not solid mass traveling at relativistic speeds. The carrier did not explode, but its command center was destroyed, killing High Commander Vrextal and his entire staff. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the Council fleet had lost 47 ships destroyed and 89 damaged. The human squadron was completely gone. Every ship had been destroyed, every crew member killed. But they had accomplished their mission. They had proven that humanity could hurt the Council, even when outnumbered and outgunned. More importantly, they had bought time. The Council fractures back at the Central Tribunal. The mood had shifted from confidence to concern. High Arbiter Quillon convened an emergency session to discuss the enforcement operation. The holographic casualty reports floated in the air like accusations. Over 12,000 Council personnel dead, hundreds of ships damaged or destroyed. The largest military operation in decades had turned into a disaster. Ambassador Thexnar of the Vrelian Empire was furious, his scales dark with rage. This is unacceptable. Humanity fights without honor. They use terror and sabotage. They kill civilians and military alike. We must increase our response. Send more ships. Destroy their homeworld. Make an example that will last for millennia. But other voices were now speaking up. Ambassador Celine of the Kelthian Confederacy, a species that resembled tall, elegant birds, stood to address the chamber. With respect to my Vrelian colleague, perhaps we should ask ourselves why humanity is fighting so desperately. We took their legally established colonies. We demanded payment for imaginary crimes. We threatened their entire species. What did we expect them to do? Surrender and beg for mercy? You sympathize with these barbarians, Thexnar accused. I sympathize with logic, Silene replied calmly. Humanity followed our laws. We changed the rules because they were not powerful enough to stop us. Now they are making us pay a price for that decision. Perhaps the price is too high. Other species began voicing similar concerns. The Margolian delegate pointed out that his species had lost more ships in this conflict than in the previous 30 years combined. The Terracon representative mentioned that public opinion on his homeworld was turning against the war. Trade was being disrupted, resources were being wasted, all to take some colonies that were not particularly valuable in the first place. High Arbiter Quellon tried to maintain order, but for the first time in centuries, the council was deeply divided. Some species wanted to escalate, to crush humanity completely. Others wanted to negotiate, to find a way out of a conflict that was costing more than anyone had anticipated. A few quietly began wondering if humanity deserved a seat at the council not as junior members, but as equals. Humanity's innovation while the council debated, Earth scientists had been working on a project that would change everything. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo led a team at the Advanced Research Facility in Geneva. They had been studying captured council technology for years, looking for weaknesses and opportunities. What they discovered would shift the balance of power. Council ships used a specific frequency for their faster-than-light communication. It was considered secure because it required massive amounts of energy to access. But Dr. Okonkwo's team found a way to not just access it, but to disrupt it. They developed a device they called the silence field. When activated, it would jam all Council FTL communications within a large area. Ships could not coordinate. Fleets could not receive orders. The entire command structure would collapse. The first test of the silence field happened during the Battle of Newton Station, a small human outpost that the Council attacked with a force of 80 ships. The attacking fleet entered the system in perfect formation, ready to overwhelm the defenders. Then the silence field activated. Suddenly every ship was alone. Their communications were gone. Their coordination was shattered. They could not call for reinforcements or report their status. The human defenders, using old-fashioned radio communications that were not affected by the field, coordinated their attacks perfectly. They hit the Council ships from multiple directions, focusing fire on individual vessels. Without the ability to communicate and coordinate their shields and weapons, the Council ships fell one by one. The battle that should have been an easy Council victory turned into a stunning human success. News of the silence field spread quickly. Council military strategists realized that their entire doctrine was built on the assumption of instant communication across vast distances. Without it, their numerical advantage meant far less. A fleet of 100 ships that could not coordinate was just 100 individual ships, each fighting alone. The turning point 6 months into the war, the Galactic Council faced a reality they had never imagined. They had lost over 200 ships. Thousands of their personnel were dead. Their supply lines were under constant attack. Their communication networks were compromised, and humanity showed no signs of stopping. Every victory the Council achieved came at a cost that made the next battle harder to justify. But the war was also devastating for humanity. Earth's economy was in ruins. Millions of humans had died. The Tertian sector colonies were lost. Resources were running out. Admiral Chen knew that humanity could not sustain this level of conflict much longer. They needed the Council to blink first. The moment came during an attack on the Vrelian homeworld itself. Strike Team 1, the most elite unit humanity had, infiltrated Vrelia Prime and planted evidence that they had access to the planet's defense systems. They did not actually have that access, but the Vrelians did not know that. The implication was clear. Humanity could strike anywhere at any time against any target. No one was safe. High Arbiter Quellon sent a private communication to Admiral Chen. The message was simple. We need to talk. The war had reached a stalemate. Neither side could achieve total victory without destroying themselves in the process. It was time for a different approach. The New Order. The peace negotiations took place on a neutral station with representatives from humanity and 15 major council species. The talks were tense and difficult. The Vrelians wanted humanity punished. Other species wanted compensation for their losses. Humanity wanted respect and recognition. The final agreement, known as the Tertian Accords, reshaped galactic politics. Humanity would withdraw from the original Tertian sector colonies, but would receive equivalent territory elsewhere, chosen by humanity and recognized by the Council. The 800 billion credit fine was cancelled. Instead, the Council would provide technology transfers and trade agreements worth far more. Most importantly, humanity would receive full voting rights in the Council, equal to any other species. But the real victory was in what went unspoken. Every species in the Council now knew that humanity was not weak. They had proven that they could fight, that they could innovate, that they would pay any price to defend their freedom. The Council would never again assume humans would simply accept unjust decisions. Admiral Chen stood before Earth's assembled governments to announce the peace agreement. "We did not win everything we wanted," she said. "We lost good people. We paid a terrible price, but we won something more important than territory or credits. We won respect. From this day forward, no species in the galaxy will look at humanity and see victims or junior members. They will see equals. They will see a species that stands up for itself. They will see us." The war had ended, but its effects would last for generations. Humanity had entered the galactic stage as hopeful newcomers seeking acceptance. They had emerged as a power that could not be ignored or dismissed. The Council had learned a valuable lesson about underestimating species based on age or size. And across the galaxy, other younger species looked at what humanity had achieved and began to wonder if they too could demand better treatment. In the darkness of space, among countless stars and civilizations, humanity had carved out its place not through submission, but through strength. They had shown the galaxy that humans, when pushed too far, would push back harder. The Council had wanted to teach humanity a lesson about power. Instead, humanity had taught the Council a lesson about consequences. The age of humanity had truly begun.